Hey guys, welcome this morning. Hey, I hope you enjoyed fall yesterday. So we're moving on to winter today. Before we get started, I want to give a couple quick announcements about some stuff that's going on. First thing I want you to know about next week is our third Sunday lunch. And so the third Sunday of every month we do a lunch together, and so we are going to do, hold on, Molly told me yesterday. We're going to do pulled pork. We're going to do pulled pork, and so if you want to come, we'll have pulled pork for sandwiches and that kind of stuff, and then we usually ask people to bring some kind of side or dessert with them, if you would. The next thing I want you to know about is we pass the offering plate every week around here, but one of the best ways you can give is to give online. The easiest way to do that is to go to our website, tablecommunity.org/give, and there's a little button there, and you just click that button, and then that's easy enough. So our groups, we've had some changes in our groups lately, and so you should know about those. The Brooms group, they moved, and so they have a new address. So if you've been a part of that group on Tuesday nights, or you want to be, they've moved over to it says Spartanburg. It's like barely Spartanburg. Yeah, it's like 10 minutes from here. And then our group normally meets at 4 o'clock on Sunday afternoons, or 4:30 on Sunday afternoons, excuse me. But we're not going to meet this week because we have several people that are kind of out and sick. And so next week what we're going to do, this week was supposed to be a hangout week, but it's no fun to hang out if everybody's sick. And so next week we're going to combine a kind of a hangout week with a Bible study week. And so we'll meet up here at 4:30. We'll probably watch some football and eat pizza and that kind of stuff. And then during halftime we'll do our Bible study. And so we got that going on. And if you've been a part of groups, some things are changing. So we changed our 6-week rhythm up so that the first 2 weeks are kind of those grow weeks, but Bible study, hangout, prayer. Week 3 is a belong, a family style meal. Then we have 2 more weeks of Bible study, and then every 6 weeks what we're doing is our 2 groups are coming together so that we can do some kind of missional outreach in our community. The first week we're going to do that will be the week of Halloween. And so we have, it looks like probably we're going to be at the Perry's house, doing stuff in their front yard, kind of as a church together, rather than just being scattered all over the place on Halloween. We're going to go to a neighborhood where people already are, and we can begin to develop relationships with people there. So, all right, that's all of our announcements. To get us started, I'm going to pray, and then we're going to do some worship through song. Dear God, thank you for today. Thank you for the opportunity to come and to worship. God, thank you for all the people that came here on what feels like a cold and gloomy day. And so we just ask that you lift our spirits higher than the weather today, and that your spirit would be felt, and it would energize us, and that we would praise you and worship you in a way that is worthy of who you are, God. We hope that you feel our love returns to you this morning. It's your name we pray. Amen.
You guys stand and worship with us.
There's nothing worth more that could ever come close. Nothing can compare. You're our living hope. In your presence, Lord, I've tasted and seen of the sweetest of loves, where my heart becomes free and my shame is undone. fill the endless. Your glory, God, is what our hearts long for. To be overcome by your presence, Lord. See your presence, Lord. darkness, you have filled me with peace. Giver of mercy, you're my hope in time. Lord, I can't help but sing. Faithful you are. Faithful
God, for the changing of seasons, Lord, and Lord, we just bless you today, and we want you to speak to us. So we just pray that God, you would speak to us through this message. God, you would speak to us through worship, and you just help us to be more like you. We love you, Lord, in Jesus' name. You guys can be seated.
Amen. Thanks, guys. All right. Will somebody turn that light on over there? I don't really like to speak in the dark that much, and I forgot to turn it on before I walked up here. So, there's a couple of people that are new here today, and so welcome. I want to let you know a few things real quick. There's bathrooms in the back over here, so if you need to go use the bathroom, just go through that door, and then kind of go either direction, and you'll find them there. And then there is coffee and hot water in the back if you want to get coffee or you want to make tea. It's kind of like a tea morning if you're a tea drinker, I feel like. So I couldn't drink it because I think it would put me to bed today. Because Molly's been gone a lot, traveling for different reasons recently, which means that it's just been me at the house, which means that I'm more tired than normal because Stevie is too. She takes a lot of energy. So today we're starting a new series on the life of Joseph. How many of you guys are familiar with the story of Joseph in the Bible? So we'll be back. You know, we spent a lot of time in Genesis, and now we're going to spend a little more time in Genesis, but not the first few chapters. Joseph is kind of toward the ends of Genesis. His story kind of begins around chapter 37, and if you know anything about Joseph, you probably know the part. He got thrown into a well by his brothers, and he got sold into slavery, and then his brothers came to him later at the end of the story because they needed help. But there's something that happens a lot in the story of Joseph, and that is Joseph has a lot of what? Dreams, right? And so we're beginning a series today called Dreamers, you know, following the dream that God gives you. God gave Joseph a dream. And so this week I was a part of a couple of different conversations where we kind of dreamed about what the future could look like and be different. So I went to this art and faith conversation on Friday over in the west side of Greenville. I was invited to be part of that. And so I went there, and the room was full of creatives, you know, musicians and artists and entrepreneurs. And all of these people there, they really kind of have a vision, a dream for the future. There's something that they're chasing, that they're going after. The Be the Bridge group that meets here once a month on Tuesday nights, our church hosts that group. You know, we kind of wrapped up a 9-month session that we were a part of, and we decided we're going to meet again next month because there's a lot of dreams in the room about what could be different and how we could make it better and even more involved. And Corey's here today. Raise your hand, Corey. Everybody look at Corey. Say, hey, Corey. Hey, Corey. Corey is going to be leading the Be the Bridge group the next session, and so that will start up in January is the plan. And so it meets once a month for 9 months. That's a racial reconciliation group, and Corey's great at leading those type of discussions, we know. And so we're excited, and we're dreaming about what the future could be. And then I had a meeting with Will Broadus and Corey and another guy about this next spring. We're going to try to host a training for leaders in the local church that want to kind of begin those conversations in their churches. Because what we've kind of discovered is there's a lot of people that are interested in having the conversation, but they're kind of nervous about what the first step is, or what does it look like to actually do that well in your church. And we gathered some minds of people who had tried to do that, and we was like, we tried some stuff, and some of it worked, and some of it didn't work, and like, let's tell people what we learned, because we think this is really important, and people need that kind of encouragement. And so I've had all these conversations this week that are about dreaming and about what does it look like. We just get a whiteboard out and say, okay, what could the future look like, you know? And so we live in a country that loves dreamers. You know, some of the historical figures we love are people like Martin Luther King, right? He's famous because he had a dream, right? But we also love people like Oprah Winfrey or Abraham Lincoln, right? These are people that kind of started from a humble place, and they said, we think the future could be different. You know, we like innovators. We like people, historical figures like Benjamin Franklin or Henry Ford or Bill Gates or Steve Jobs. And we like explorers, you know. We like stories about Lewis and Clark. And you know, we like naturalists like John Muir. That these are people that not only say the future could be different, but there's something really great about what we have right now that's worth preserving and taking into the future. And so we love these kind of people that have dreams. The Smithsonian, they have a magazine, and they released the 100 most significant Americans. This was pretty recent. And these are the categories they had for them: trailblazers, rebels and resistors, presidents, first women, outlaws, artists, religious figures, pop icons, empire builders, and athletes. Right? These are all dreamers. These are all people that saw the future and saw it could be a little different. We love these people that think there could be something more. So one of the things I love about being in a church plant is a lot of people that come to a church in kind of the early stages of development are people that think, you know, maybe I've been a part of something and I knew that it wasn't quite the way it should be, or I haven't been to church in a long time, this is a new thing, so I'll try that out. But the underlying thing with church plants is there's a lot of people who have hope. There's a lot of optimists that join a church plant because they think maybe we could do it differently, we could do it better, right? And so we have these hopes and dreams, and all of us are pursuing something, right? Whether that's a family or a school or a relationship, a certain somebody, a job. Maybe you're an entrepreneur and you're like, I'm going to go out and I'm going to do this thing. And so we all have dreams, but today what we're going to see is that God actually has dreams for us. Okay, that God has a dream for you and for us as a church. You know, God has given us a dream as a church. One of the things that we talk about our vision around here is that we want people to know and become like Jesus at the table. Right? That's a vision about people. Right? If you look at this, you say, okay, I want people to know Jesus. What does it mean to know Jesus? To have a relationship with him. But I don't want it just to be that. I don't want them just to know Jesus as Savior and know him as Lord, but I want them to actually follow him and become like Jesus, because we believe if that happens, then people's lives are actually changed. You know, and so we talk about our mission is the way we do that is that we show love to people one table at a time. That's one conversation. That's one interaction. That's one, let me take you out to coffee. That's one, let me go out and clean your yard up because you have this need, and let me have a conversation with you and lead you to a place, because the best way I know how to love people is to help them know Jesus and help them become like Jesus. And so that's what we're going for around here. I was speaking to a pastor earlier this week, and he said he had this kind of strange conversation with the leader in his church where the leader said, some churches are about vision and some churches are about people. He's like, what are you talking about? Right, I get that some churches may seem, very corporate. Like we have a corporate vision and this is what we're striving for. But that's a false dichotomy that you cannot have a dream, you can't have a vision from God and not also be about people. If you look at our vision, it's all about people. Right? There's nothing here that says, hey, we want people to come and build a place called Table Community, right? No, we want people to know Jesus, and we want people to become like Jesus. And sometimes we think if we have a vision, if we have a dream, that means that we have a focused effort, right? We have intention. And we think that if you have a focused effort, that must mean that we're focused on a task. But I want you to understand that God never calls us to just go do stuff. Right? God's vision is always rooted in people, right? And you want to know how you can tell if your dreams and things you're chasing are not from God? You can always go back to the great commandment, right? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself, right? It's called to love God and to love people. And if the dream that you're chasing, if the vision that you feel like God has given you doesn't ultimately lead you to show God love and show God's love to people, well, then that's not a dream from God. You know, a lot of times, if you come in, the way you can tell this, if you come in like guns blazing, you're like, we're going to fix a problem, right? We can look at our neighborhood and say, we're going to fix racism, we're going to fix poverty, we're going to fix church division or whatever it is, right? If your belief is fueled by this idea that I can somehow do something better than everybody else who's ever done it before, well, then people are going to be skeptical. And I think people should be skeptical of you. Because Jesus did not call us to fix problems. He called us to love people. And so, when your dreams are about fixing problems or completing tasks or just doing something, then oftentimes your dream is about you. Right? Your dream is about ego. And what we're going to see today that's going to be really important is that a lack of humility can derail the dream that God has for you. okay, that if you don't chase this thing that God has for you and do it with some humility, and if you make it about you and not about others, then ultimately you're going to miss out on the dream that God has for you. And so today we're looking at the story of Joseph. If you guys want to, you can turn to Genesis chapter 37. It'll be on the screen as well. And I want to be very careful about how I frame the story of Joseph, because it's an interesting story. Because Joseph is both a guy who messes things up himself, and then he's also a guy that has some really bad stuff that happens to him, and that part is not his fault, right? So as we look at the story of Joseph, I want you to understand that in the first few chapters, nobody is really a hero in this story, okay? Joseph's dad is not a hero in this story, and Joseph's brothers are not a hero in this story, and Joseph is not really a hero in this story, right? This is one of those stories where you can really blame everybody, and you can really have empathy for everybody on some level. You know, it's kind of like watching, any of you guys watch the show Ozark on Netflix? Right? It's pretty dark and twisted, right? There's not a true hero in that story, right? You have empathy for everybody, and you're kind of rooting for a lot of different people, but they're all kind of making some bad decisions along the way, even though they've also, in some ways, are the victim of some things that have happened to them as well. And so today, the story of Joseph ends with Joseph being sold into slavery, right? And Joseph is very much a victim of undeserved treatment. So if nothing else, right, some of us have had some really awful stuff happen to us. I want you to understand this. The moral of today's story is not that if you handle the dream that God gives you poorly, then somehow you deserve to be victimized. Okay? That's not what's going on today. But we have a tendency to glorify Joseph as kind of this innocent kid with no backstory. Okay? Because things end poorly for him. And so the person we're following is Joseph. And so it's important to be honest about Joseph and who Joseph is. That Joseph is not like this great, awesome dude as we start the story, right? We need to be honest about him. Joseph is not like Jesus in this story, right? He's not the sacrificial lamb. And then it's also important to be empathetic toward Joseph moving forward, because we're going to see in future lessons that what happens is we look back at Joseph, we can kind of understand why he makes some of the calls that he makes, even though we're like, hey, you know, Joseph, you're not really doing the right thing right there, but I can understand where that's coming from. And so it's important for us in our society to understand that sometimes people who have been victims of stuff, they come out and they do things that we would not endorse, but we should have empathy and understand where they're coming from in that. And so Joseph doesn't do anything to deserve really the severity of the treatment his brothers give him today. But being a victim doesn't like all of a sudden erase all the mistakes that Joseph has made, and that we can actually learn from Joseph's mistakes today. And so Joseph is a guy that doesn't really handle life and the dream God gives him all that well, and he's also a victim of some stuff that's happened to him, right? So he's made his own mistakes, and he's had some things happen to him, and that makes it difficult. And so as I was reading this week, I was like, man, Joseph is kind of a guy I can relate to. Right? Joseph is a guy that's broken. He's all kind of broken, and yet he's called to lead and to chase the stream that God had given to him. Right? And he doesn't always handle it perfectly, and some things that he doesn't deserve happens to him as well. And so he kind of, through all of that, his own failures and things that happen to him, he's struggling to figure it out. So that's who Joseph is. And so we begin in Genesis chapter 37, okay, and Joseph, if you're familiar with the story of Joseph, it's like 12 chapters long. It's a super long story. There's not a lot of people in the Bible that get that much time, that many verses dedicated to him. And so we're not going to sit here and read like all 12 chapters over the next 3 weeks, or none of you will be back next week if I made that promise. So we're going to begin in chapter 37, and we're going to cover the first few chapters today. It starts out like this. Joseph is born to a guy named Jacob. Now, some of your Bibles may call him Israel. And it says that Joseph is Jacob's favorite son. Okay? And he was born to Jacob's favorite wife. Okay? So in December, we're going to give birth to a baby boy named Arlen, and he's my first son. So he will be my favorite son, born to my favorite wife. Okay? Just like this. No. So I want to just take a moment and I'll tell you about a resource real quick before we jump into this. Because you kind of read that and you go, okay, he was born to his favorite wife, which we assume that means he must have more than one wife, right? And you're probably going, that's not cool. And so we live in a time where we go, it's not okay to have more than one wife. Do we agree with that? Anybody disagree with that? Okay, this probably isn't the place for you. We're going to have to talk. Okay? But when we look at the Bible, there's some things we need to understand about the Bible, okay? That all of the Bible exists to point us ultimately to the person of Jesus. But what a lot of us don't realize is that the Bible was inspired by God, but it was written by men. So in some ways, the Bible itself is an interpretation of who God was to these people in this time and this place. And so there's this book that we have back at the Resource Center called The Blue Parakeet. And it's called Rethinking How You Read the Bible. And so if you read something like that and you go, what am I supposed to do with that? This might be a good resource for you. Okay, because what's happening here is it's written by people in context, right? And they're trying to explain how God is moving in their lives where they are in their context. And so what we have is we see God move through the Bible, that God is constantly accommodating people and meeting them where they are on their journey and leading us to the life that we find in Jesus. So if you struggle with some stuff like that, or you get a little hung up with a verse like that, that might be a good resource for you. So we got that little resource shelf in the back. Everything back there is $10. Most books cost like $14, but it's easier for people to just have $10 to give. And if you don't have it today, you can just give it some other time. And if you don't ever have money, then I won't fuss at you. I'd rather you read a book about the Bible than not. Okay? So here we go. We're going to jump into the story. Okay? Verse 3. It says, Now Jacob loved Joseph more than any of his other sons because he had been born to him in his old age. And he made him an ornate robe. He made an ornate robe for him, right? This is the coat of many colors. So all I want you to understand from this first verse is that Jacob is the worst, okay? Jacob is the worst, right? If you have more than one child and one of them is your favorite child, keep that to yourself, okay? Don't tell people, because that's not going to go well. And so what happens is Joseph is kind of propped up from the beginning. He's the youngest child. In my family, the youngest child always got special treatment, but this is a little more than special treatment. And so he gives him this robe that none of the other brothers got. And so he doesn't really deserve this robe. He doesn't really deserve this recognition. And so we're going to see how his brothers feel about that. It says, when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word of him. Now, that's probably not the right response from them, but can you kind of understand that response, okay? So we're talking about dreams today. When you're chasing a dream, if you've been given unearned recognition and unearned authority, it probably will not be met with respect. Okay, it will probably garner jealousy from people. It will uncover all kind of jealousy that they have in them. You know, I kind of liken Joseph to Lonzo Ball. How many of you guys know who Lonzo Ball is? No idea, okay? Lonzo Ball was drafted last year pretty high in the NBA draft to the Los Angeles Lakers. Now, if you know anything about Lonzo, he's got a dad that is very much like Jacob, okay? He loves Lonzo. He talks big about Lonzo. And before Lonzo ever played his first minute in the NBA, his dad had created an apparel line for him, and he had his own signature shoe, right? Which is something that NBA players, they kind of work hard for. Okay, and so before this guy has ever stepped on the court, he's been given kind of this branding, this recognition to go with him. And so, as you can imagine, there were some players in the NBA that didn't like Lonzo so much coming out of the gate. And for all the same reasons, his brothers, Joseph's brothers, didn't like him. So Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. Okay, so when you have dreams, you can't expect everybody to be happy about them. Okay, very few people are going to support your dream until there's any kind of real evidence that you have skin in the game, even if it's a God-inspired dream. Okay, this is one of the things I learned when we first started planning a church and started raising money. People were like, we'll give when you reach whatever point, right? People want to know that you got skin in the game. So verse 6, it continues. Joseph, it says, he said to them, he said, listen to the dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out into the field, which you're going to see that Joseph doesn't actually work in the field with his brothers. So we were binding sheaves of grain out in the field when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it. His brothers said to him, do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us? And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said. Now, is Joseph wrong for having a dream? No. Right? And this is a dream that we assume came from God in this story. It seems to be that way. So God's given Joseph a dream. And when God gives you a dream, something to pursue, something to chase, that dream comes with some responsibility. Okay? Joseph should pick his words carefully because he's responsible for this thing that God has given him. Right? If Joseph has any sense at all, when he tells this dream to his brothers, he should kind of expect them to react the way that they react. Because, my sheep stood up and y'all's bowed down to it. How does that sound? Not too well, right? And so there's a right way to do this and there's a wrong way to do this. And Joseph is going to say, give us an example of the wrong way. Okay, one of the things I was very happy about when we first came to town and said we were going to plant a church is the way that we talked to and we talked about other churches. Because God had given us this dream that we were supposed to come here and we were supposed to come to Greer and we were supposed to plant a church. Well, if you look around, you may realize by now that we are not the first people to do that, okay? And so it was important how we talked about what we were doing. Because the dream that God had given us was that other people would know and become like Jesus. Which is not a dream about us and what we're doing, it's a dream about what God is doing. So it was important for us when we showed up, as the younger brother, to show up and to really to talk about this thing that God is leading us to. It's not about us and it's not about what we're doing. And we don't think that we're going to show up and do it better than everybody else that's ever done it before. No, actually God's been at work for a really long time here, leading people to know and become like Jesus. And we get to be part of that dream. We get to join in on what is happening. Now, that's a dream that's not about us. That's a dream that's about people. And other churches can respect that, right? Because we're not out to get anybody. We're out to build everybody in the kingdom up. And church planners kind of get this reputation of a lot of times they think they can do it better than everybody else, right? And so as you look at Joseph and the way Joseph frames and the way he talks about his dream, right? Does he frame it in a way that says, really this is about others or this is about me? Right? We get the impression from the way that Joseph's brothers act because of the dream and what he had said, right? So they ask him, do you intend to reign over us? So if he would have said no, I assume they probably wouldn't be that mad, right? Right? If he would have said hey, my sheaf is going to rise up and I want to lift others up with that, they probably would have responded differently. So you kind of have to assume that he says, yeah, I think that's what it's about, right? It's about me rising up over others. And so as you pursue your dreams and you chase these things, are your dreams about people, about loving God and loving people? Because people want to know if your vision is really about people. Because I can get behind a person whose dream is about people, right? Or is it about something else? Is it about I need to prove something to myself? Is it about I need to build status? I need to build a platform for myself, right? So Joseph's presentation suggests that Joseph is all about Joseph, okay? That he's trying to build something up for himself, and his brothers aren't all that interested in that, right? Joseph's brothers don't seem to think that Joseph has their best interest in mind. Right? This is kind of why, on Instagram, it's kind of hard to get behind personal brands sometimes. And I'm speaking as a guy who, does art and has a personal brand, right? Right? I get it. Is it all about you, or is it about serving others? Because people who are more interested in position than in serving others, they're kind of hard to like sometimes. And so Joseph is all about Joseph right now. And so we like to give Joseph a break because we know, bad things are coming for him. But if you didn't know that Joseph was going to get thrown into a well and be sold into slavery, you wouldn't like Joseph very much at this point in the story. Okay? Joseph is not a guy that you should throw in a well, but you might be tempted to throw into a well, okay? And so, which you should never throw anybody into a well, and his brothers are completely wrong, and you can pick them apart all you want. But as we follow Joseph, Joseph is making some mistakes right now. Right? He walks around with this coat of many colors, right, to show that he's the favorite son. It's one thing to be the favorite son, and it's another thing to tell everybody you're the favorite son, okay? So as you think about your dreams and things that you're chasing, are you loving God and loving others, or are your dreams and things that you're pursuing in life right now, are they ultimately about you? So in verse 9, it gets worse. It says, then he had another dream, and he told his brothers, listen, he said, I had another dream, and this time, this is ridiculous, the sun and the moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me. And he told his father as well as his brothers, and his father rebuked him and said, what is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down on the ground before you? His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. So Joseph wants his brothers to know that he's going to rise to greatness. And so at this point, even Dad, who Joseph is his favorite son, is starting to regret that he's kind of built up Joseph's ego to this place, right? That his favoritism is starting to get to his head. And so that's a problem. And so we fast forward a little bit, and what happens is, it says, now his brothers had gone to graze their father's flocks near Shechem. Now Joseph didn't go to them. Joseph didn't have to work with the brothers, right? And Jacob said to Joseph, as you know, your brothers are grazing the flocks near Shechem. Come, I am going to send you to them. Very well, he said. So he said to them, go and see if all is well with your brothers and with the flocks, and bring word back to me. So Dad sends Joseph to go check on the brothers in the field. Okay, verse 18 says, but they saw him from a distance, and before they reached him, they plotted to kill him. Here comes that dreamer, they said to each other. Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns, which is a well, and say that a ferocious animal devoured him, and then we'll see what comes of his dreams. So his brothers don't see Joseph so much as a person, they see Joseph as a problem that needs to be fixed. Right? And remember, Jesus doesn't call us to fix problems, he calls us to love people. And his brothers, they see Joseph as a problem. Okay, verse 21 says, when Reuben is one of the brothers, when Reuben heard this, he tried to rescue him from their hands. He said, let's not take his life, he said. Don't shed any blood. Throw him into this cistern here in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him. Reuben said this to rescue him from them and take him back to his father. So Reuben thinks, we're going to put him in the well, and then I'm going to go back and I'm going to rescue him while nobody's around. I'm going to take him back to Dad. Okay? So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the ornate robe he was wearing, and they took him and threw him into the cistern. The cistern was empty, and there was no water in it. So I told you there's no heroes in this story. And so if there was anything close to a hero in this story, it would be Reuben. Because at least Reuben kind of pauses for a minute and says, hey guys, this is probably not the best idea. Right? Joseph is our brother, and ultimately we're going to have to answer for this. Right? So we all need Reubens in our lives. We really do. And I don't just mean like the delicious sandwiches that you get sometimes. Right? Right? We all need Reubens in our lives. We all need people who are more worried about our well-being than our prospects. See, this is important because a lot of us are chasing something. We're all after something. There's some dream that we're pursuing. And at the end of the day, you need somebody around you like Reuben. Somebody who's more concerned that you are going to turn out okay as a person than whether or not you achieve whatever it is, the thing that you're pursuing. Right? I need those people in my life, and you need those people in your life. You know, one of the things me and Kel meet on a regular basis, and I always tell him, I said, character trumps talent every time. You know, when you're working with somebody, especially in ministry, whatever it is, the dream that you're pursuing, right? Investing in somebody's character and making sure that they turn out to be a good person, that's more important than their talent or their skill or where they're going or whatever the dream they have. No matter how lofty it is, at the end of the day, if that falls apart, you want somebody there like Reuben with you. And so Reuben is actually a person that's worth listening to in this story, worth following. He may have waited a little too late to say something, but at least he hesitates there, right? Because see, Reuben is interested in the person of Joseph, right? He doesn't see Joseph as simply a problem that needs to be fixed, a solution that needs to be found. And so we all need people in our lives that are going to care about us, even if our dream fails. Verse 25. As they sat down for the meal, they looked up and saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh, and they were on their way down to Egypt. All right, so the Ishmaelites, these are people who are traveling in a caravan. They've just bought some stuff. They're going to take them to Egypt. Now, if you know anything about Egypt in the Old Testament, Egypt is a place where there are lots of slaves, okay? So verse 26, Judah's one of the brothers, Judah said to his brothers, "What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood." His brothers agreed. So, Reuben's having a little influence there. It says, so when the Midianite merchants came by, his brother pulled Joseph up out of the cistern and sold him for 25 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took him to Egypt. So how do you think Joseph is feeling right now? Right? Joseph has had this dream. And in this dream, his sheaf stands higher than all the others. And he stands tall and everybody else bows down to him, right? That's the kind of dream we like to get from God, right? I am going to give you the winning lottery ticket, and I'm going to give you position and power, right? We would all like that dream from God, right? That would be great. That would be great. But God doesn't intend, what we're going to see is that God doesn't intend for the dream to be about that God is going to give Joseph these things so that he can be a blessing to others. But Joseph doesn't see that right now. See, Joseph thinks he's had a dream that's all about him, and now he's finding him in himself where his prospects are not looking really good. He's being taken to Egypt. That's another country as a slave, right? He kind of feels like God is probably crushing his dreams right now. Right? And sometimes when the dream that you have, even the dream that comes from God, right? Sometimes we get to that place, then we need to be humbled, or we'll never be able to live out the dream that is rooted in loving God and loving others. And so what I'm not saying here is that God caused Joseph to be thrown into the well, okay? Or to be sold into slavery. What I'm saying is that God can use these things and will use these things in Joseph's life to bring him to a place where he can actually live out that dream in a way that it's not about Joseph, but that it's about others. And that's an important distinction to make. That God doesn't just say, Joseph, I want these bad things to happen to you. No, that wasn't God. That was Satan's influence. But what God is doing is he's saying, these things, these misfortunate things that have happened to us, that God can use those to lift us up. And so God can use us, the things that happen to us, to bring healing in our own lives that we might otherwise ignore. So we have bad things, we have setbacks that happen in our lives. And it could feel like God is crushing your dream. And God may actually allow it to crush your dreams so that he can fulfill his dream for you. See, this is a thing you need to understand that Joseph doesn't understand yet. Is that God's dream for you is bigger than you. What God wants you to do in life and where he wants to take you is much bigger than you. Right? God's greatest commandment wasn't love God and love yourself, right? You know? It's good to love yourself, but it was to love God and to love others. Right? Joseph thinks that in his dream that he is ultimately going to get all the glory. What he doesn't realize is that God is leading Joseph to be part of his dream, and in his dream God gets all the glory. See, what will happen when Joseph's dream comes true and he stands there and his brothers are bowing down to him? It won't show that Joseph is great. It's going to show that God is faithful. It's going to show that God is strong, that Joseph isn't worth bowing down to, but God is worth bowing down to. Right? And we can't truly prepare our lives for the dream that God has for us without humility. Because ultimately, God's dream is always about loving God and loving others. And you can never love yourself well, love others well, if that's the case. So as we look at our next steps this week, I really just want you to ask yourselves 2 questions. Ask yourself this. What is your dream? Like, today is really about perspective. It's about understanding, because we're going somewhere with this series, okay? So we're headed somewhere, okay? And it's important for you to understand in your mind, okay, where am I now, so that as we move forward, you'll have a better understanding. And God can speak to you through that. So what is your dream? What would you say it is? What's your purpose in life? Right? What is the thing that you're chasing? What is the thing you're striving for? Maybe it's family. Maybe it's a job. Maybe it's status. Maybe it's just to be a person that shows God's love in your neighborhood. Whatever it is, identify what is my dream. And then ask yourself, is it about me? Is it about me, or is it about others? Is it about people, or is it about something that I'm doing? Okay? Is it about people, or is it about fixing a problem? Okay? Is it about people, or is it about building up myself and building up my own brand? You know, I said a lack of humility can derail the dream that God has given you. And that's what this story comes down to. That Joseph walks into this without a lot of humility. And God cannot quite use Joseph the way he wants to yet, because Joseph has made the dream that God has given him all about himself and not about loving God and loving others. And God's dream for you is bigger than you, right? God's dream for us is bigger than just us in this room right now. That God is calling us to help others know Jesus and to become like Jesus. That's not about me. That's not about you. That's about loving God, and that's about loving others. So as you walk away from today, ask yourself, what is my dream? And is that about me? Or is that about loving God and loving others? Is it rooted in that? Because what we're going to see is in Joseph's life, until he can reach that point, that his dream is, he realizes that it's not about serving himself, that it's about serving others. Then Joseph will never be able to be a part of a dream that God has given him that is bigger than Joseph. Let's pray. God, thank you so much for today. Thank you for your son, Jesus. God, as we move toward a time of communion, I just pray that as we go to the table, we'd be honest about the things that we're pursuing in life. We'd be honest about the dreams, the hopes, the things that we're chasing, that you have given us. God, have we made those things about us, or have we made those things about you? And if we've made them about us as we go to the table, God, I said we lay those things aside and we look to your son Jesus, his blood and his body crucified on the cross. God, that we would recognize that God's dream for humanity is found in the person of Jesus. And Jesus is someone who sacrificed everyone to show God's love to us. So God, we thank you for him. And we just ask that as we move forward, that your presence would convict us and lead us to a place of goodness and wholeness and love that can only be found in you. Amen.
You guys go ahead and stand with us as we worship.
breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. We live for you. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder. Show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. Worthy of every song we could ever sing. Worthy of all the praise we could ever bring. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Sing Jesus. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder. Wide eyed, mystified, may we be just like a child, staring at the beauty of our And on you, Jesus. You are beautiful in all your ways. 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 We never lose our wonder. We never lose our wonder. May we never lose our wonder. May we never lose our wonder. Sing wide-eyed and mystified. May we be just like a child, staring at the beauty of our King. May we never lose our wonder. May we never lose our wonder.
Thank y'all so much for joining us today for worship. Just a few quick announcements and then y'all will be dismissed. First is groups. One of our groups meets here on Sunday at 4:30. Another group meets on Tuesday at 6:30. So if you have any questions, you can find myself or Aubrey or Justin and we can help you guys with that. So addresses and times. We're also putting together prisoner packets. So we are getting all of our stuff. We're going to have the kids put them together. Just another way that we can get involved in our community and be missional about it. So if you have any questions, just come up here and look at the different things that we are needing for those packets. And at Table Community, you're set.